Verbs with Mary Morrell.
But first, a definition. Verbs are basically doing words. They show action. The man is walking the dog, or maybe we could say the dog is walking the man. They also show state of being. She is happy, she appears happy, she looks happy. But it is not as simple as that. There are several other words we use to describe verbs. As you can see from this diagram, we can classify them into finite and non-finite verbs, and beneath those two terms there are several other words we are going to look at. But first we're going to look at the distinction between finite and non-finite verbs. Finite verbs have a present, past and future tense. For example, talk, talked, will talk. Work, worked, will work. Non-finite verbs don't show tense, so they are the participles, the gerunds and the infinitives. A participle is a verb form ending in either ing or ed, working, worked. Gerunds are nouns derived from verbs. For example, writing is easy, I like knitting. The infinitives are the simple or base form of the verb, love, work, to work, walk, to walk. So now we're back to looking at finite verbs, and we can categorize them into auxiliary verbs and lexical verbs. So first, the auxiliary verbs. They're the helping verbs. We use them to form other constructions. So in this case, a person is waving. I would like to fly. Is and would are our helping verbs. There are two types of auxiliary verbs. The primary auxiliary verbs are the verbs to be, do and have. I am, you are, he is. I do, you do, she does. I have, you have, she has, and so on. The second type of auxiliary verbs are the modal auxiliary verbs, sometimes just called modals or modal verbs, and they indicate possibility or necessity: can, could, may, might, must, shall, although we don't use that very often these days, should, will and would. All the other finite verbs are lexical: dream, run, write, seem, act, learn. Lexical verbs can be transitive or intransitive. Transitive verbs take an object. The rabbit drove the car. Intransitive verbs don't take an object. She lied. Most lexical verbs are regular, which means they have a consistent past tense ending. Worked, played, looked, danced. So new verbs that come into the language tend to take this ed ending. For example, Googled. But English has many irregular verbs. They're verbs that have been around in the language for a very long time, and so they are not likely to become regular verbs anytime soon. Imagine saying eat, eated, come, comed, wrote, wroted. So we are stuck with them, and they are not consistent in their endings. A few are becoming more regular over time, and as they do so, we are having two forms side by side. For example, dreamed and dreamt, smelled and smelt. Which do you prefer, the regular or the irregular ending? So let's have a look at the diagram that we looked at earlier, and hopefully it will make more sense now. So verbs can be categorized depending on their tense into finite or non-finite. Finite verbs show a past, present or future tense, and non-finite verbs have no tense. The non-finite verbs are participles, words that end in ing or ed, or gerunds, the verbs that act as nouns such as I hate knitting, or the infinitives, the base or simple form of the verb, e.g. love, to love. The finite verbs can be divided into auxiliary or lexical verbs. The auxiliary verbs are the primary helping verbs, and the modal verbs are words such as should, could, must. Lexical verbs are either transitive or intransitive, which means they either do or don't take an object. In summary, verbs show action or states of being. To find out more about grammar, register for my online course, Grammar, Punctuation and Usage.